On Tech News Today, Facebook takes another shot at Snapchat, Yelp takes another shot at Google, and Twitter takes another shot at Facebook. It's a Silicon Valley circle of life. Coming up next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, June 29th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron will send you all the ingredients to cook fresh, delicious meals with simple step-by-step instructions right to your door. See what's on the menu this week and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's blueapron.com/twit. Tech News Today is a show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. My name is Mike Elgan. Welcome to the show. Our co-anchor today is CNET.com editor-in-chief Lindsey Turrentine. Hey, Lindsey, how the heck are you?
I am great. I'm at home.
Your office looks very, very domestic. What's going on? Are you off today?
This is actually my dining room. The light is best in my dining room.
Yeah, it's very, very nice light. You're based in on East Bay, right?
Yeah, Berkeley, beautiful Berkeley, California.
Wow, nice. Love Berkeley. Well, Lindsey, today is a big day in the world of consumer electronics. The iPhone was released, actually, by Apple. Not announced. It was announced in January, but released 8 years ago today, June 29th, 2007. And man, that was a big day. In hindsight, it didn't seem that big of a day, like that big of a deal. And I think a lot of us thought that the iPhone would fail miserably because what does Apple know about phones? They proved us all wrong. They've been very successful with the iPhone, especially financially. A huge percentage of Apple's revenues and profits come directly from the iPhone and the iPhone ecosystem. But I think that is easily considered a watershed in the world of consumer electronics. Do you remember where you were on the day that Steve Jobs announced the iPhone in January, and also when they released it? Were you one of the line standers, for example?
I was not one of the line standers. I was in the office working my tail off. That was a big day for us, and it actually felt really big for us at CNET anyway on that day because there had been such a crushing amount of interest from the readers. I mean, we knew it would be big because for months and months and months we had already been writing anything we could, and people couldn't get enough of it. Yeah,
and just to take you back in time about what people were thinking back then, there were 2 things about the iPhone that freaked everybody out. The first was that it didn't have a keyboard, and of course I didn't completely dismiss it, but I chose to not get an iPhone because I was so happy with my BlackBerry Pearl, which was, I thought the iPhone was way too big to carry around. Of course, the original iPhone was tiny by today's standards, but I thought it was way, you know, the BlackBerry Pearl was about the size of a box of chiclets. And I thought that was the direction phones were going. And then I was kind of an anti-iPhone person until they came out with the App Store and the apps started coming out. And I was like, wow, this is really great. The other thing, of course, that went with that is that people complained, you know, bitterly. Besides the size, they complained about the lack of a keyboard. And Apple sort of trained the world to accept a screen instead of a keyboard. And yeah, now nobody talks about it anymore. Back then, there was like, nobody's going to use this on-screen keyboard.
Well, my whole thing is that I don't think anybody's going to use any keyboards for that much longer. We're just going to talk to our phones. But yeah, I remember a lot of conversations, this is gross, but a lot of conversations about how people were going to handle the face grease on the screen.
Yeah, yes.
It's like, gross, it's going to be so gross. And then everybody just, you know, we just use these.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that that came back with the iPad. People talked about how there's smudges all over it. So this will never work because, of course, it's going to be smudged all the time. So very weird. People get used to stuff, I guess, is the moral of the story. Why don't we jump in, speaking of stories, why don't we jump into the first story? Facebook is testing a new photo uploader for iOS, according to a report by Josh Constine at TechCrunch. The new uploader is packed with Snapchat-like features. Josh Constine joins us now to talk about it. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show this morning.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Now, before we get started, can you tell us what's going on with your background? That is amazing.
Yeah, so me and some friends run an art gallery called The Sub in San Francisco, and this is a piece of artwork it's a collaboration between Will Atwood and Harrison Love, and we do monthly exhibitions here. So I'm excited to get to broadcast from a place full of art and show off the work that we have around.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. And so let's jump into the news here. What are these Snapchat-like features that you wrote about that Facebook is introducing?
So basically, when you upload photos now, Facebook doesn't want you to just leave them how they are, because those are kind of boring. I think people have seen so many sunsets and cute selfies, but we want something different. And so now Facebook is going to allow you to do a bunch of things to your photos before you upload them. The big one that's the most Snapchat-like is that you can overlay text over your photo. So you can choose a different color, write something, and then it'll get pasted right on top of the photo. And let's see, there's also a new set of filters that Facebook's added. So previously, Facebook photos had the option to be filtered, but now there's a really cool interface where you basically swipe your finger across the screen and it'll pull on different types of filters. So there's ones themed after the different seasons, like a really bright one for spring and a really muted one for winter, as well as a black and white one you saw above. And then you can also add stickers on top of your photos. So Facebook has its own sticker packs that it originally launched for Facebook Messenger, and they were designed by a woman named Sophie C. But Facebook's found such success in them that it's brought them across all of its products and now you can lay them right on top of your photos. So you could put things like googly eyes or a mustache on it on one of your photos, or add little funny characters that they have that are sort of like grander, more artful emoji.
So Josh, Facebook has been sort of chasing Snapchat for a while now, trying to purchase it, failing at that, and then kind of watching Snapchat just take off, especially with the young people. Do you think that just adding filters and text over images is going to help Facebook keep up or catch up? Or do you think that it's still missing the sort of essential Snapchatness, which is the disappearing aspect of the messages?
Yeah, I think the ephemerality of Snapchat really gives it a unique feel, and really just the feel of using that app is so different. It's so full screen. It's about constantly being immersed in this visual communication, whereas Facebook is more about communicating in text and with a lot of different types of mediums. And so I think here Facebook is just trying to sort of box out Snapchat. It knows that people have responded really well to this ability to throw stickers or text or filters over images, and they don't want to be left in the dust and let people say, well, if I want to do that, I have to go on Snapchat. I don't think it expects to be stealing users back from Snapchat, but it might help Snapchat or prevent Snapchat from growing any larger at the expense of Facebook.
Maybe you can help me with something here. I mean, I think that people do like to add text and googly eyes and stuff to their photos. They like to do it, but do they like to get it? Do people want this kind of thing in their stream? In other words, when they get the collective stream, do they want is it appealing to a majority of Facebook users to get that kind of text, enhanced pictures and so on in their stream?
So on the web, I think it will look a little bit funny because the photos are sort of set farther back away from you in the screen, and adding text and lots of little details like stickers can seem a little bit strange because they just don't look as good from farther away. But I think when you're using Facebook on the phone, which is where most people are using Facebook nowadays, the photos are real close up, and it really lets you tell a story in a much more vivid way. It's like if you showed that image that I put in my my article, it's like just putting a cute dog that looks kind of sleepy, like that's funny, I guess, but like. And if you added a little caption to it at the bottom, it gives it a little bit of a story. But when you put the text right on top of it, it's one combined image, and it's so vivid, it's so striking, you immediately get that message right away. And I think that vividness is what Facebook wants to sort of crib from Snapchat.
All right, one final question. Is that your derpy dog there in the picture?
No, it's not. But I'm a big fan of a bunch of meme sites like Imgur and Huge Lol. And through those, you can find sort of the best breaking memes on the internet. And so I try to jazz up my own articles with things that people want to look at rather than just using pictures of my own face.
Fantastic. I use my own face. Go ahead, Lindsey. You were going to say.
I was just going to say that the humanity, that made me laugh. The humanity.
It's working.
I mean, that's the best example.
Yeah, it's absolutely working. Josh Constine is at TechCrunch.com and on Twitter, Josh Constine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Josh.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Next time.
We got some more news for you coming right up, but first let's talk about delicious food from Blue Apron, our sponsor today. Blue Apron is an awesome service because what they do is they deliver fresh, ready-to-cook meals right to your door in a refrigerated box. Not a frozen, this isn't frozen food. Nothing is frozen. It's all fresh food, and they've got these ice packs in the box to keep everything refrigerated. Now, you make it yourself. They give you exactly what you need to make food yourself. Now, you think, well, why would I want that? I can just go to the store and buy stuff. Well, there are a number of reasons why this is a great way to go in practice. For starters, they never give you the same meal twice, and some of their meals are very kind of exotic. They're the types of foods you would never prepare in your own kitchen, and you may not even have access to some of the ingredients, the spices, and so on, but they'll provide you exactly with the ingredients and spices and everything you need to make these dishes. Now, in addition to the fresh ingredients, they have these beautiful step-by-step recipe instruction cards that just enable you to cook multiple aspects of the meal all at the same time. So you end up spending about less than, in my case, it's been less than a half an hour per meal to do a dinner for 2 people. And it's so easy to do. And of course, it's a really satisfying meal, but each meal ends up being around 500 to 700 calories per person, which is really, really great. It's really light food, but you feel very satisfied with it. They've got so many great meals. They'll work around your schedule. They'll work around your dietary preferences. If you have specific things you want, you can go in there and customize what you get. You can check out this week's menu and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. 2 free meals. Just go to blueapron.com/twit, and we thank Blue Apron for their support of Tech News today, and I thank Blue Apron for making me feel like I know how to cook. It's great stuff. Well, a well-known Columbia Law School professor and author named Tim Wu says in a new study that Google spins its search engine results to unfairly benefit its own services. Where have you heard that before? Larry Dignan is the editor-in-chief of ZDNet and joins us now. Hey, Larry, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great, thanks. Now, what does Wu say about the fairness of Google's search results exactly?
Well, he basically said they're gaming it to show their own stuff, which, I don't think shocks anyone. Increasingly, you see results and it says Google reviews. I mean, the biggest thing is like Google Plus, right? They plug that a lot. So a lot of Wu's paper kind of goes through those logistics. And then he also used something, let me look up what it was called. It's basically this add-on called Focus on the User, which basically takes Google's algorithm and strips out the Google stuff.
Huh.
And it shows you how the results are different. So for no other reason, the paper is worth reading for that. It's an add-on that's available on GitHub. And it's pretty interesting because it kind of highlights how Google plays with its own content, which, anybody that's been following Google results, that most of their revenue has been coming from owned and operated sites, the YouTubes and, Gmail, all that stuff. But it used to be that it was more of a network of sites that, played with AdWords. And that's where the bulk of the revenue used to come from way back when. But for years now, it's been owned and operated sites. So I think what we get into is just, how much of a utility is Google and how much market power they have. And I think, what Wu was saying is basically, they're dominant on both sides of the marketing equation, right? So whether you're a merchant, whether you're an independent site, it's a real issue. And I guess what's interesting about Wu is basically he used to be a Google fellow. So that was one of the reasons I decided to write about it, because normally I probably would have glossed over this report a bit because Wu was paid by Yelp, which obviously has a stake in, the anti-competitive stuff against Google. But it's a paper it's worth a read because it sort of gets into A/B testing. It gets into whether clicks are actual engagement. Like if I go to Google and I search something and Google integrates its own stuff and say they give me an answer, that means I don't have to click. Google would argue that's better engagement. Wu wouldn't. So it gets into a lot of nuanced stuff that's pretty interesting.
Hey, Larry.
Hey?
I know you.
What's happening? I know you.
Can you explain a little bit more about the actual Google results that we're talking about? And it seems like Tim Wu is really focusing on the small business or just business related results that you get when you search for a particular business. And you put some of this in your article, show a screenshot of a search for a pediatrician in a city in Europe. And we're talking about a certain kind of result. Can you tell us a little bit more about the results that we're specifically talking about?
Yeah, well, it's the results with the universal search. It's the results as if you were, I mean, I think where it gets interesting is if you're looking for, I think their main point was, you know, the screenshots I used were to pediatricians, right? And their argument is that by showcasing a Google review of a pediatrician probably isn't as good as one from Health Grades or ZocDocs, which is what they brought up. And if you go through those sort of things, like say you're looking for a plumber, right? Like you would think Angie List reviews would be surfaced everywhere. Instead, you know, you might get a Google review, and maybe it's a Google review tied to somebody's paying Google for a referral or whatever. So you kind of see where it goes. I think for other things like directions and say the latest, say you're looking for an Outback Steakhouse or something, then maybe it doesn't matter as much. But it is interesting, and you know, I think it illustrates their market power. The thing I get to though is, you know, okay, the EU's poking around on this stuff, and this will have some play. But, you know, I mean, we just know from the Microsoft trial, these things take years and years and years. And by the time anything gets done, well, it's all changed anyway.
Larry,
so
quick thing now. Let's say, for example, that Wu is absolutely correct and his methodology has revealed an actual, measurable, verifiable bias for Google's own services within Google search results. There's an argument that says the following. The product that Google is offering in its search results is Google's opinion on which are the most relevant results. And they've created lots of products out there. And they've created those products with the belief that their way of doing those products are better than the way that other companies have done competing products. And therefore, it's only natural that Google's opinion about what's most relevant is likely to be its own sites in general. And again, that's the product. Google's opinion about what's best and most relevant. Is that a reasonable argument, or should they try to be just completely neutral?
Well, it's a reasonable argument until you get plugs for Google+.
Yeah,
that's where that argument kind of falls on its face, for me at least, right? Like if you're showing YouTube stuff or, you know, maps or stuff like that, like a lot of Google products are great, and yeah, they probably would turn up in the algorithm anyway. When you're plugging the hell out of Google Plus and search results, call me crazy, it's not the best product in the world.
You're crazy.
Yeah, exactly. You must be one of the 4 people using it.
I am, in fact.
But the problem with that argument is it sounds a lot like Microsoft saying the browser should be part of the operating system. I mean, that line between product quality and bundling can get murky.
Well, the other point to be made about Microsoft's argument, the argument, in fact, back in the 90s, I think it was that, hey, we're only as good as our browser. If a better browser comes along, then people will use that other browser, and that happened. They were right about that.
Yeah.
So
I think in the future, I mean, I think the thing that these papers and the antitrust stuff do, much more than like the actual legal outcome and how long that plays out, I think they make companies more conservative somehow.
Yeah.
Right? Like it just makes them think twice.
Yeah.
And maybe they miss a beat.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens over time. Like I don't think the actual legal ramifications and whatever fines they hand down, I don't think that really matters much at all.
Yeah.
I think it's when you have regulators poking around your business all the time, you get a little gun shy.
Yeah, and that can be good and bad at the same time, depending. Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I think that happened to IBM. It happened to Microsoft. It'll happen to Google. And, you know, maybe at some point we're talking about Facebook search or something like that. But I do agree with Google that, you know, any search engine could rise up and punch them in the teeth.
Yeah.
Because tech history just shows that. So, well,
in fact, in various markets, that is the case. In the U.S., Google isn't nearly as dominant as it is in Europe, where they're really going after them for antitrust. And in countries like China and Russia and elsewhere, Google's almost a non-player. Larry Dignan is at zdnet.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at @Dignan. Thank you so much for joining us today, Larry.
Anytime. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Well, Twitter has tried just about everything to grow faster, everything except Facebook-like algorithmic filtering of tweets. In other words, Twitter is the last major bastion of unfiltered social stream content. Alex Kantrowitz is the senior technology reporter for BuzzFeed News and wrote a really interesting piece today about this very issue. Welcome to you.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So glad you're here. Now, what changes has Twitter made in the past to boost the number of people using Twitter?
Well, they all basically fall under one main category, which is they've gone from a text-heavy platform to a visual platform. So I think you've seen that they've expanded images by default and gone to autoplay video. So Twitter used to be this like really, I almost want to call it intellectual place, but sort of like a goofy place where the strength of your tweet was always contained within the text. And now Twitter has, maybe to make it easier to use or to make it more attractive to advertisers, now has included a lot of videos. It's going to autoplay them. And also now it's expanded images, and it's also like added an e-commerce layer to the platform, all in the quest of growth, and it still hasn't. So the question is, what's left for Twitter to do? And the answer is there's only one thing left. Not really sure if they're going to do it, but they have only one big option, which is to filter their feed.
So Alex, I have a lot of friends who run small businesses and have paid for Twitter ads. A lot of them come back and say that was a waste of my money. Can you describe a little bit about why an algorithmically driven feed is sort of a business move that Twitter needs to make? What is it about letting algorithms determine the sequence of tweets that you see that would make this a better move for people who are paying Twitter?
It's a great question, Lindsey. I think about what you might be paying for when you run a Google search ad. So if your friend has a bakery and someone searches for cookies in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, then your friend would know that that's a good place to advertise their bakery business. But if you're on Twitter and you write a tweet and promote it and say, hey, we have great cookies, and then all of a sudden an amazingly large news event happens, just imagine trying to sell your bakery goods in the middle of last week, where it was news nonstop, and Twitter became incredibly conversational and focused on these news events. It's just much harder in general for a platform to like Twitter to sell advertising, because most ad agencies aren't set up to buy around it. So an algorithm is a questionable move because there's a chance that it might suppress some of that conversation. On the other hand, on the bright side, from a business perspective, if you slow it down a bit and just surface the best tweets, it all of a sudden feels like an advertiser isn't intruding in a conversation, but actually placing a message against something that feels more natural for an advertiser to be next to.
Now, Alex, you quoted a whole bunch of really expert people on both sides of this issue, and there's no agreement. Some of them said this is like they absolutely have to do it. This is totally necessary. And other people you talked to said, no, this would be a disaster. Can you briefly summarize the arguments for and against Twitter using noise filtering?
Yeah, and we definitely did that intentionally. I don't think that there's any right answer on this. And in fact, I'm not convinced one way or the other. So we wanted to make sure we got both sides in there. The anti is an easier argument to make. Basically, people think that the magic of Twitter is that it can surface random people's thoughts or events at any moment. So take the events in Ferguson, Missouri, for instance, that first boomed on Twitter, and we've seen that happen in many, many instances, including when bin Laden was killed. The news broke on Twitter first, including some tweets that were retweeted like crazy right from the scene. So the idea is that if you don't filter Twitter, then stuff like that magic can still live. Those proponents for filtering Twitter believe that the platform is just too noisy. There are way too many tweets being posted, like 500 million a day, according to Twitter investor Chris Sacca. So it's become increasingly difficult to find the good tweets through the noise. And a filter or an algorithm would then surface the best tweets. And so every time you hit Twitter, you get value, not 1 out of every 5 or 6 times, which is what I sort of find happens right now.
Hey, Alex, so, one of the interesting things about Chris Sacca's post about Twitter to me was that he talked both about the need possibly for this type of filtering, but also kind of talked about the loneliness of Twitter and the fact that if you're kind of if you're small potatoes or you're just joining and you're not part of the sort of hierarchy of people who are big on Twitter, it can be a little bit of a quiet place, and you send things out there and you don't get any response. Could an algorithm make that worse? It seems like Twitter's in a really hard spot here because they don't want to alienate people who are already struggling to be heard on Twitter, unlike Facebook, which, love it or hate it, has the genius of the social graph, and you really knows who your actual friends are.
I totally agree with your point about the loneliness of Twitter. In fact, I started using Twitter when I was still in sales and marketing. I spent 3 years in sales and marketing before I went to journalism. And I felt that I was just publishing tweets into the void and no one actually cared. So it's been actually very interesting for me to see. I don't have a major following, but to see as I've gone from like 300 followers to a little bit more, how different the platform gets. And I felt that I was missing half of its functionality. The algorithm could definitely make it worse. But I think that argument that Saka put out there is a little bit off base, because I do think that while Twitter can feel lonely if you're just publishing your rants out into the void, there's another element that I think he misses, which is that you can still talk to pretty much anybody out there. I was involved in a conversation with a comedian, and then somebody replied into our conversation last night, and he got a reply from the comedian, and I think it made his day. You could see that, like, the first thing he did was tweet, "I got a reply from this guy. My life is made." And so that's a special element that Twitter has that will never go away, no matter what they do with the main feed. So I think people should keep that in mind.
Well, if anybody at Twitter is watching the show, my vote is for you to just throw the switch on algorithmic filtering, but have like an easy way to switch back to non-filtered tweets, because I think it should be an option like it is on Facebook. I think most Facebook users probably don't know that option is there and may not even know that their news feeds are being filtered. But personally, I would like the option to keep getting the full fire hose and not have it algorithmically filtered. Alex Kantrowitz is at BuzzFeed.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Kantrowitz with a K. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
All right. An extra second will be added tomorrow just before 5 p.m. Pacific. And if you need a little bit more time, you're going to get a little bit more time tomorrow. Some experts say the leap second will create problems for the world's computer systems. Rachel Feltman writes about science for the Washington Post and joins us now. Hey, Rachel, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. Now, and I think we have an extra second to spend on this topic here. We can burn that second today instead of tomorrow. Now, why do we need an extra second? Why does the planet Earth need that second?
So the reason we need an extra second is basically that our clocks are better at keeping time than the Earth is. Pretty much everyone is running on this centralized universal time, and it's based on atomic clocks, which only lose a second about every 4 million years, maybe even more than that. So they're really accurate. But the problem is that the Earth actually loses time in its rotation way more often than that. Technically, we think of the Earth as taking about 86,400 seconds to rotate every day, but it's actually 86,400.002 and constantly getting longer. So it's not a regular thing. It's not like you can say, oh, the Earth is getting this much slower every year. It depends on a lot of geological activity. So the best we can do is monitor how long it's actually taking the Earth to rotate and then adjust our standardized time to fit that. So what happens is that every once in a while they throw in a leap second to keep the standardized time based on atomic clocks and the standardized time based on the actual rotation of the Earth within 0.9 seconds of each other.
That's fascinating. And also maybe a little bit scary. Is this, some people are freaking out a little bit. Is this the Y2K kind of moment for computers not ready to adjust to 61 seconds in one particular minute? Or is this going to kind of just, pass us by and maybe there'll be a couple little snags here and there?
So the important thing to remember is that this has happened before. The last one was in 2012. It actually used to happen every year, but now they need them less often. But the problem is that now we have more and more systems that use atomic time and will get really confused if there's suddenly an extra second in the day. So the last time this happened in 2012, there were some hiccups. A few sites were down for a few hours. I think Reddit was down for a few hours overnight. And there was some there were some problems with flight delays, not actual problems with planes in the air, the way people were worried about with Y2K, but in scheduling because the systems got a little messed up. So there are definitely hiccups that can happen. But I think the expectation is that we're getting better at dealing with the leap second, not worse. And nothing devastating happened in 2012. So probably no need to worry that anything devastating is going to happen in 2015.
Now, the standard way to approach this is to add that second at a specific time. And I think it's 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. But Google has their own approach, which is called the Google smear. Can you talk about what the Google smear is?
Yeah, so a few years ago, Google started working on the Google smear, which is the idea that instead of adding an extra second right before midnight UTC, which is about 5 p.m. Pacific, they spread it out over the course of like 20 hours before then, adding milliseconds periodically over the course of a whole day. So at the end of the day, Google systems are caught up to the extra second. They're not behind, or rather ahead of the rest of the world's systems. But instead of it happening all at once, it's gradual. And Google has had a lot of success with keeping any hiccups from happening by kind of easing their systems into it.
Okay, well, for one, I'm thrilled that I get an extra second tomorrow because I'm on vacation. So one more second of vacation. Remind us one more time what time it is that this will happen.
So this is midnight UTC, which is that's 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. So the second before that hour starts is when you will get your extra second.
Unbelievable. Rachel Feltman is at WashingtonPost.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at Rachel Feltman. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the Supreme Court today decided not to hear Google's appeal of a lawsuit by Oracle that required Google to pay for its use of Java. Google argued that APIs should be free for anyone to use. Oracle argued that they're covered by software patents, and Oracle is seeking about $1 billion in payments from Google. The lawsuit will now return to a San Francisco federal court for more proceedings over Google's separate fair use defense. Lindsey, Turrentine, what do you think? APIs, should they be covered by software patents and charged for, or should they be free for anyone to use?
Well, my relatively uninformed opinion on APIs is that I think they should be free for anyone to use. I think that this is the currency of the internet. This is how services are going to talk openly with each other. And if you shut them off, it gets a lot harder for startups and young companies to hook their products into the larger products out there on the market. But I also am just fascinated by the sort of legal wrangling that has to happen here. There are some really smart, very well-informed lawyers out there arguing these cases. There must be, because it's incredibly complicated.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And of course, the point of view depends on where your money comes from. Oracle makes its living selling software. Google makes its living giving away software and charging for advertising. And so it's no surprise that they each have their respective opinions on this matter. But we'll see what the final resolution is sometime in the next year, I guess. Well, we got a follow-up for you. We told you Thursday about protests by French taxi drivers who blocked roads and caused havoc in Paris and other cities in protest against Uber Pop, which they say is illegal. Now French police have arrested 2 Uber executives. That's right, man. Cuffed them. Did the whole perp walk and everything. They hauled them off to the slammer, and they're going to be questioned. I doubt they'll be thrown in prison, actually, but they will be questioned in relation to this. I don't know how Uber does it, Lindsey, Turrentine. They just get so much resistance in so many different cities, and they just keep driving forward. No pun intended.
Well, you know what's so funny? I think this is amazing what Uber's doing, actually. No judgment associated with this. It's just kind of an astounding story. France said Uber Pop is banned a while ago, and Uber's way, and then started to actually fine some Uber Pop drivers. And Uber Pop, again, is the equivalent of Uber X here. It's sort of the cheap version of Uber, where drivers can drive their own car without a special license. Anyway, France said, this is illegal. We're going to fine these drivers. And Uber said, fine. we pay the fines. So those drivers get fined by the French authorities, and then Uber just pays those fines, kind of like your employer paying your parking tickets. But it is pretty amazing that Uber just kind of goes, we're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah. It is amazing, and by the way, I wish Leo would pay my parking tickets, but that's a separate issue. Yeah, it is amazing, and the reason that Uber does this, their argument for this, is that they say we are not a ride service, we are not a transportation company, we're an information service, we're an app. We find people who want to drive for money, and we find people who want to ride and willing to pay for that, and we simply connect that. And they basically claim that what they're doing is simple free speech. And in any country that honors free speech, they should be allowed to basically connect these different people together and organize these rides. And it's an interesting theoretical idea, and it's being tested all over the world in all kinds of different ways. And we'll see how it goes in France. But I think France is probably going to be one of the first places to outright ban Uber.
For sure. Yeah. France does not want to let them eat cake. I don't know where this is going. Never mind.
Yeah, man. Trying to outpun me. Well, in product update news, both Apple and Sonos confirmed to BuzzFeed over the weekend that Apple Music will be made available on Sonos by the end of the year. Not a big surprise, Lindsey Turrentine, but still a welcome one. I wonder why it's going to take them to the end of the year. Of course, Apple Music ships tomorrow.
I bet it's just simple engineering. They want to make, Sonos probably has very high standards for integration, and so does Apple. They want to make sure that it works seamlessly, and I'm guessing it's some combination of making sure that it works seamlessly and then, haggling over some of the money details.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got some big numbers for you. 100,000 is our first big number. That's Apple's new limit on the upcoming iOS 9 for the number of songs you can add to iTunes Match, which is Apple's system for adding non-Apple purchased music to iTunes. The old limit was 25,000. I wonder how many people have 100,000 songs, and if they have 100,000 songs, if they pay 99 cents for every single one of them.
I guess, well, they could be, people who had a lot of CDs before everything changed, and they've just ripped them all, and they're sitting there.
Could be. Anyway,
waiting to be uploaded.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't think they should have any limitation on that, but it's good to have it be 100,000 rather than 25,000. Well, we've got another big number for you. 37. That's the percentage increase in the average price of a smartphone in China after the launch of the iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. In the third quarter of 2014, the average price of a smartphone in China was $192. I'm sorry, that was the fourth quarter of 2014. $192. That shot up in the following quarter to $263. That's the average price of a phone in China, simply because of the iPhone. So Apple was able to get Chinese consumers to do something that nobody else had ever done, which is pay way too much for a phone.
Apple is good at that.
They're very good at it. Nobody does it like Apple. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Andrew Kratochvilin in Virginia Beach, Virginia, who posted this picture on Twitter of himself watching Tech News Today on a phone while overlooking a fantastic beach. And he says, love the show, and we thank him for that. And there it is. Why look at a beautiful ocean view when you can watch Tech News Today, I ask.
I love it.
Yeah, isn't that great? Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup or your beach view and post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. Lindsey Turrentine, what are you working on?
Oh, well, Apple Music comes out tomorrow. So if you need to know anything about it, we're working on pretty much everything you need to know. A lot of writing about Apple Music, a lot of reviewing of Apple Music, and a lot of tips on how to use it.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are really grasping what's coming tomorrow. There's all kinds of wacky stuff. There's a radio station. There's like a semi-promotional social network of some kind for the celebrities to use, or the artists, I guess, even the ones that are not quite celebrities yet. So there's a lot of stuff coming. And what time is that? That's at 8 o'clock in the morning?
I don't think we actually know what time it is yet. Apple tends to roll this stuff out in the morning, though, so expect it's whenever you get your iOS update.
I see.
So when you get your iOS update and you decide to install it, then you'll have Apple Music.
All right. Well, thank you, Lindsey Turrentine. We'll see you next Monday.
All right. See you next week.
You can subscribe to Tech News Today on Spotify, or you can choose another way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can also watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1700 UTC at twit.tv. Click on the live button. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TechNewsTodayTV. You can follow me on all the social networks at Elgan technews.com. And don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every single weeknight. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. This show is produced by Jason Cleanthes and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. See you tomorrow.